Hey everyone, happy Friday and welcome to the Wilder Ride. Before we start the show, wanted to remind everybody that we do have a way of financially supporting what we're doing, and that is via our Patreon page at patreon.com/The Wilder Ride. And so it goes without saying, we owe some people a thank you. Let's start off with Tara Bain, who has been with us from the very beginning, our very first patron, a stalwart supporter of the Wilder Ride. Thank you, Tara. We have two executive producers we need to give top billing to next. That includes Wendy Muller, who joined us last season and has been a stalwart supporter. Thank you, Wendy, for all of your support and your activity in the listeners group. And to Ross Seymour, a golden ticket subscriber. You get executive producer credit as well. Ben 40 Ford, from across the pond, a member of the podcast team of 60 Minutes With, a podcast everyone should be subscribing and listening to. Doug Greenberg, one of the hosts of The Rocky Minute, also a podcast you guys should be subscribing to. Doug, thank you so much. Off the Bounce, the basketball podcast. Thanks, Coach Peacock. We appreciate your support. A big shout out to Jeff Lieboff, one of the hosts of Radio Labyrinth, a podcast you guys should be following. Keep in mind, though, not safe for work. Also, a big thank you to Professor Robert E.G. Black, a podcaster himself, part of the Movies by Minutes family. He did the show Dave Made a Minute and Michael Myers Minute, also in the midst of The Room Minute. Yours truly, along with Walt, were both on Dave Made a Minute, and I was on the Michael Myers Minute. So thank you, Robert, for being a supporter. Melissa Moody, we appreciate your support being out there, and Rob Smithers. You guys are fantastic. It takes a lot to put on a show like this. If you'd like to be a supporter, please join our Patreon group. It starts as little as $1 a month. So let's get to it. Before we waste any more of your time, let's welcome to the stage, Gene Wilder.
Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Happy Friday to you. We are nearly done with the movie. We're coming up on minute 90. This is season 2. By the way, the Wilder Ride, if you haven't figured it out, is a podcast that celebrates the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. Season 2, we've been looking at the movie Blazing Saddles, and today we're going to dive into minute 91. How did he do such wonderful stunts with such little feet? Minute at a time. I'm your host. I'm Alan Sanders.
I am your co-host, Walt Murray.
And joining us for the very first time as we begin to wrap up this movie, we have author J.W. Webb. J.W., welcome.
Hello.
What's the J stand for?
Well, most people call me.
You blew it again. How do you fuck up the same joke a second time?
So, I told you I'd blow it again.
So what is the JW? What is it? Does it stand for something?
William.
James.
James William.
So
yes.
What
do
most
people call you?
Jim.
Jim?
Yeah. Jim.
Okay. Do most people call you Jim? You still blew it. I'm going to show you how this is done. Right?
I was better the first time.
This is how it's supposed to happen. You're supposed to say, hey, JW. He's like, yeah, well, JW is James, but, my name is Jim. But most people call me...
I got it. Okay. I got
Jim.
I got it.
So, hey,
third time's a charm.
Author J.W. Webb joining us here in studios. Welcome, J.W.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
What's the J.W. stand for?
Jim.
Jim?
Yeah. But most people call me Jim.
Oh. Well, welcome, Jim.
Thank you.
Guess we'll do the next line. We are your hosts. You are our guests. We always go to the guest first and say, since you're just now joining us, even though it's at the very end of the movie, we always like to get an idea of where Blazing Saddles fell in your mind or back when you first saw it. Do you remember when you first saw the movie?
Yeah, it would have been around about 79, I think. I was in the military back then, in the Army, British Army, and there was a lot of big movies around that time. That was one of them. It was a huge cult movie across the pond, very, very big across the pond. Absolutely loved. And I think we were talking about it earlier that there wasn't the kind of PC sort of situation there. You could pretty much throw stuff out there, and there was a kind of innocence behind the sarcasm and everything. So it was a huge hit. And I had a posse of friends that we used to drink actually back then. Well, occasionally.
Used to?
Yeah, well, probably a little bit more than they do now, but then again, maybe not. But we used to lurk in this old town, this place called Hastings, and there was a battle there a long time ago, before Blazing Saddles was actually made, and some guy got an arrow in his eye. But no, we used to. I had there was some pretty rough lads, and we used to hang around, and we used to get plastered and go to the disco. And by that time, we were so plastered, nothing ever happened in the disco, and we used to get thrown out the disco regularly. But but there was one particular pub called the Crown, and it was kind of deserted, and we used to talk about Blazing Saddles and other big Life of Brian, with various comedies, movies that were around. All my mates, particularly Steve, who my dad called him Stevie Wonder, and he was white. I never really got that, but my dad wasn't really into soul music. I don't know what it was about, but there you go. But anyway, we used to hang, excuse me, something in the throat. We used to hang around the old pub in the Crown, and my mate Paul, who had these 2 horses on his arms, he was a rough lad in 3 missing teeth, front teeth. He used to be a boxer. Explains his teeth, and he was a big Blazing Saddles fan. But what I never understood about him, he used to go and put the jukebox on, and he would put Bright Eyes by Art Garfunkel on, you know, the old Rabbit song, and he'd start weeping. He would sit by it, and he would be weeping. And I often think of that now, and when I look back to that time period, I have this feeling of, coming home on leave from the army, and there was like Blazing Saddles, this huge movie. We used to walk around. We couldn't get guns over there, so we'd walk around with our fingers in our trousers and grunt a lot, do the Mongo sort of shuffle. And this Paul Martin, he used to just wander around and just sit there by the jukebox. I think he had a very sad corner. He reminds me of Mongo a little bit.
Did he do that all the time, or only when you were
only in the Crown pub?
So it was just like that was
the rest of the time he was pulling
ritual.
birds. He was pulling birds all night long. Well, he wasn't actually, because he wasn't very good at it. But he was drinking a lot of beer and Guinness. But no, it was the Crown pub. All we did in the Crown pub, there was never anyone in there apart from us, and a very grumpy old. Kind of like
this
Basil
was on a
Fawlty.
Crawl, so this was just what, like stop 3, stop 4?
This was stop 4.
Stop 4, okay.
It was stop 4. It was down a dirty alley, and no one went there. And this Friday night, no one went there. I think
how bad is that pub when you can't even get the local?
I think I've been to
only thing
that place in Marietta.
The only thing you could get to eat was pickled eggs. Pickled eggs were huge, and snails. There's sort of
okay.
Snails in vinegar sort of thing. That's the only, or maybe pork scratchings, which were big as well. But that's the only thing you could get to eat there. So we would just do arm wrestles. We'd have pint number 4 there, because we only had 1 pint in each pub, but there were about 10 or 11 pubs. So it was Friday night.
That's a good crawl.
So that's when we got to the disco. It was always a bit.
But he always did it when he just went to the. So was there something about the Crown? Did you ever find out what it was about that location?
No, it was a combination of the atmosphere in the Crown, the peeling wallpaper, and the combination of that and
this place makes
Bright
me sad.
Eyes. And he would just sit there and he would just weep, and we would leave him to it over in the corner, and we would do our arm wrestling, and he would come in and have the last arm wrestling.
Let him have a good cry, and then he was good for the rest of the night.
He was good to go. He was good to go.
That's
we
wild.
were all.
Walt, I thought you were a strange friend.
I thought I was too. Not so much.
Okay, we got to up your game now. Okay, we got to start putting a routine where every time we go to the 4th pub, you start bawling, playing Bright Eyes in the jukebox.
I just do it every time we come in the studio.
Well, I know why you do that, because you're coming to see me. I get that.
Right,
That's
exactly.
That's not really a trick.
Him again.
The movie today, and it's 45 years later, the year where we're putting this podcast out in 2019. People may stumble across it whenever. But it's 45 years past its anniversary. We wanted to do this movie because we felt, there's so much sensitivity today, and people, they shut down sometimes when the sensitivity, I get being more open and more understanding of words and things, but when you choose to not listen to the message of the movie, you miss the point of the movie. So I was going to ask you, what are your thoughts about some of the language in the movie? Did it ever bother you, and how do you feel about it today? Well,
it's tongue in cheek. I mean, it's totally tongue in cheek, and I think today we tend to hide from stuff. I mean, I think it's actually worse in Britain now. The PC, the politically correctness that's out there. I mean, good is good and bad is bad, but there's so much hypocrisy, I think, and often the people that sort of preach the what you should do and what you shouldn't do are actually the people that aren't doing it. And I think Blazing Saddles was superbly intelligent, particularly for that time. It was open, and it was laced with a real funny irony. Mm-hmm. And you get that, but there are parallels with other movies. One that comes to mind is Life of Brian, which was huge around that time. That some people just didn't get back then, but I think now I certainly don't think you would get away with a movie like Blazing Saddles now. Even though it's ironic, even though it's showing, I think when I'm thinking of a movie not at all like it, but sort of along those vibes was Tarantino's that one. What was it called? Django
Unchained.
Yeah, with the guys with the white gowns on and
the Klan.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, just there was a lot of use of the N-word, but it was acceptable because it was using it in a dramatic way, and Django gets the revenge, which I think is ironic, Walt. We have a black sheriff who also gets in a way sort of the revenge over Hedley. He completely destroys Hedley's plans. In fact, shoots the bad guy.
Yeah.
We found that out yesterday.
I still am scratching my head that every single guest that we've had so far has said basically the same thing. They love this movie. Everybody they know loves this movie. It's the funniest movie ever made. You couldn't make it today.
You couldn't make it. You couldn't make it today. I mean, it just, there would be too many people screaming about it. And
that's sad.
It
actually
is.
I mean, I think that's a sad thing because I hope people that are listening to the podcast maybe are reflecting. We've done a lot of that. It's amazing with a comedy, and we're diving in and having a good time and laughing a lot. But there's a little sort of like a Mel Brooks movie. There's some substance underneath if you just scratch the surface.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, one thing that Andrew Bergman said, I was listening to a podcast interview with him today, and they were talking about the campfire scene, and he said, now every comedy you turn on has a fart scene in it.
Yeah,
and some of them have multiples. And he said it's now just a very worn out joke.
Well, it's the sort of thing that's only funny once, isn't it? Or you watch the same clip with that movie's always funny because, as you say, it's the first time. But if you see it in 5 different movies, it becomes sort of staged. It becomes old.
It does. And it's not groundbreaking anymore.
No, it's sort of done. Oh, we need to put this in here, but actually, no. You know, if something's new and fresh, then it's always
it becomes low hanging fruit. I think it's just the easy go to get a cheap laugh.
I think we've talked about this.
Worn out.
I'm not attracted to the comedies that if all you're going to do is the gross out or the base humor, there's a place for it, but not the whole movie.
No. And I think that some of the filmmakers today miss that, is that they just want the gross out laugh, but they have no real substance.
It's either that or they're so far up their arse you don't really know what they're on about anyway, you know, but which is the other side of it, you know.
Yes, which is why I should be a filmmaker.
They're the ones that get the Oscars, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
But all right. Well, before we then set up for this minute, because I'm going to ask you, you mentioned Life of Brian, but are you familiar also with
Holy Grail?
Holy Grail, thank you. Are you familiar with Holy Grail? Good, okay. Good.
Yes.
In fact, you rode here on his coconuts.
I did, and that's why I'm still feeling a little bit sore.
And speaking like that anymore. I kept brushing against the horn. Oh! You're riding too far up in the saddle, kid.
Sometimes take it easy.
All right, well, before I tell you what's coming today in minute number 90 as we wrap up this work week, we still have a couple more minutes for tomorrow, next week, and Jim will come back and join us Monday and Tuesday. But tomorrow, Walt, is Saturday. Tomorrow is Saturday the 29th, and we have 2 birthdays to celebrate tomorrow we want to let everybody know about. First, we'll give the older gentleman, the older statesman, Slim Pickens.
Yes. Was
born in 1919, but still alive today, also born on Saturday, Mel Brooks.
That is amazing. Amazing. And what will he be, 93?
He was born in 26, so yes, 93.
90.
It's amazing.
Wow.
Amazing. And apparently still going strong.
Let's hope so, otherwise I have to edit this.
That's right. I have to have a little drop-in clip here.
As of the recording, he's
alive and kicking.
So,
all right. Well, we had Chris Corman all week up until today. We had him talk about a lot with his dad, and it was cool hearing from him and a lot of the behind the scenes. But we finished the quote unquote death scene today with Harvey Korman having been shot. The stage direction called for it in the gut, but it looked like he was grabbing just a hair lower.
Yes,
but he'll start off this minute basically falling. After looking at the impression of Douglas Fairbanks, and we're going to end with the townsfolk all replying, bullshit. I'm going to have to bleep that, but that's what they end with.
That's what they end with.
So we start the movie, Walt, still in 1974.
Yes, the 15th and 37th wall have been torn down, and we're still spilled out into L.A.,
and this is outside of Grumman's Chinese Theater, where you would have, we've seen this before, almost everybody. I don't care at what level you're discovering Hollywood. Everybody knows that if you get to a certain point, you could be asked to have your hands and footprints put into the concrete and then sign your name into the squares around the theater.
Yeah, well, asked is a loose term. It's actually there's actually pretty weird process to it.
Well, that's buying the star is different. Versus,
that's right, because this is the imprint.
Right, this is the imprint. This is only a handful of people get to do this. But
I guess someone's got to keep up knocking up fresh concrete anyway, because you never know who's going to come along.
That's true.
Right.
You know, you've always got to avoid those wet bits.
Yeah, you may.
If you're not invited, like.
Yeah, right.
You got kids' bike tires go through. Oh,
It could be a cat. Could be a cat.
ceremony.
Dog.
Yeah.
Dog runs through.
Somebody on a pogo stick and
Get off. Bugger off.
So Harvey Korman here, as he's down on his knees, he looks down and we see good luck, Sid, Douglas Fairbanks, hand and footprints. And he has this wonderful line as he's dying. Most people, as a dying last line, you know, you might say something like, I was wrong, or forgive me, or
I should have gone to Publix.
Yeah. But he says,
How did he do such fantastic stunts with such little feet?
It's a fair question.
It is. It's a great question. Well, and I guess he was still working on his Best Supporting Actor nomination, so he wanted to go out with some flair and class.
could be. Certainly wasn't in the script.
Really?
He knew he had that amount of time as he was falling, and he thought, they'll remember it if I say something
Say right now. Maybe that is good. You don't
Rather
say the
than,
stereotypical.
Heck, this hurts.
Yeah.
You know, which would be kind of.
I was wrong, or I regret nothing.
Should regret something.
But this was a complete change on the set. This was not in the script. He was never supposed to say anything about Douglas Fairbanks or doing the wonderful stunts. Just fell over, and when he falls, it looks like he falls in wet concrete.
Yeah, it looks that way.
So that actually is in the script. According to what the script is supposed to show, all that's supposed to happen is, with a dying gasp, Lamarr rolls out onto the cement, leaving his impression. He then signs his name with his forefinger and dies.
It's drama. It's beautiful drama.
It is.
It's positively Shakespearean the way that happened.
Now, when did he do it, though? When did he actually
Before
write
he was
his
dead.
name?
Yeah.
Before he was dead.
No, he
Douglas
couldn't have.
Fairbanks.
No, not
No,
Douglas. No, Douglas Fairbanks did that a while ago.
Douglas Fairbanks did it shortly before.
Yeah, but he's
shortly
still
after
alive.
his
He's not brown bread yet, is he? No.
But-
Well, he is brown. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Okay.
So when he falls across, I guess, Douglas Fairbanks into this new wet square that's just off screen. We never actually have an insert of him writing. All of a sudden,
Nope.
we pull back to sort of a medium shot. Camera swings around now from the behind
Hedley
where he
Lamarr.
fell. We see
Yeah,
one
but-
hand in concrete, but his other hand is written Hedley Lamarr.
Yeah, but it's
And
pronounced
notice-
Henley, isn't it? Because everyone gets mad when you call him Henley. Yeah.
Well, and he makes sure that we know that it's not heady.
He understood.
Yes, it's
writes definitely
Hedley,
underneath
Hedley,
the L.
Hedley.
Don't
Yeah,
forget
Hedley.
the L.
Yeah,
Hedley
that's right. Hedley.
Lamarr. Why the dollar sign? He puts a dollar sign in there.
I guess he
all
only
he
had
was-
time for one. He probably would have put another one into there.
Probably.
He would have.
But I mean,
multiple.
it's fast work because they must have known he was going to snuff it, and someone run along, lifted the old concrete, knocked up a bit of new stuff with a carting trowel, and said, "Like Hedley's falling, like there he goes. Move the cat." So you don't get any
See if he has
footprints
any
in there.
parting messages for us.
Well, what do you think that means, though? To leave, leaving his name, fine. He's putting his own name in. He's leaving his impression. But why the dollar sign?
Well, that's all he's cared about.
That's his whole thing.
Yeah,
That's his whole thing.
Yeah.
He's not a hypocrite. He says he's a bad guy. He likes money. He smokes big
Into
cigars.
the evil for which he stands.
So
That's
you gotta
right.
admire that in a kind of way. If you're a sort of pervy bad guy, you're going to like that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's right.
I guess it's a great reminder. He was only in it for the money.
That's right.
And he was happy to go because it didn't work out.
I don't know if he was happy.
Well, he was impressed by the feet, the Douglas Fairbanks. Fairbanks.
How much have you been on a pub crawl before you got here?
No, I'd be a lot better if I had.
So he does. I guess that's the last. This is all we say goodbye to Harvey Korman.
That's right.
It's
sure
kind
do.
of sad, I think. I think he's
Yes.
misunderstood.
Really?
Nah.
No, I thought he was pretty clear from the very
if you
beginning.
think he's okay, you've misunderstood him.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. Message to the audience. If you've been cheering for Hedley, you've got the wrong impression of the movie.
We may need to start over.
He's got a certain class. He's got a certain evil Lee Van Cleef way about it.
Yeah.
You know, you could just add a little bit of Ennio Morricone and a little bit of and then Heddy's there.
Yeah. Well, you know, he is. We talked about
He's
how
got
he
that
never,
class.
think about it, as bad as he is, he never uses any bad language until, like, he never says the N word, any epithets.
No.
He stays very.
He's got a certain class.
But isn't that funny how Mel Brooks is painting that picture of the politician Just because they're not swearing or using language inappropriately doesn't mean that they're not inappropriate.
Well, right. He's got people doing the dirty work for him.
Right.
Yeah,
but that means he's the mastermind.
He's not a peasant. He's Dr. Evil. And he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to stoop that low.
He doesn't have to do a lot of it himself. He has other people do it.
Yeah, you've got to admire that.
But
if you're going to be evil, you might as well be sort of.
I'm second guessing why we brought you here. Didn't you say we just found you on the street?
Yeah, I was walking past.
He's missed the entire.
Grab you by the short and curlies.
Oh, wait. Hello.
Grab me by the short curlies.
I'm awake. It's like the Joey Tribbiani School of Acting. If you need to cry in a scene, you cut holes in the bottoms of your pockets. And you reach down and you start plucking the short hairs. Like,
that would do it. That would do it.
That would do it.
Yeah, remind me not to go to that one.
It looks like when the Waco Kid says,
Wow, you shot the bad guy.
It looks like they're getting ready to take their hats off, almost like, sort of like
they're sorry about
a farewell.
Yeah.
We don't get to see them fully take their hats off. We just hear them say, and then we cut back to them, their hats are off. So is that just a good guy thing to do?
He was a worthy adversary, I feel. I mean, he was rotten to the core, which made him a worthy adversary. I mean, he had no winning traits, or apart from the fact that he wanted to win. But, he was just an honest, nasty bad guy.
Yeah.
And there's, nowadays, bad guys are too messed up. There's too many complications with being a bad guy. Back then, you could just be a bad guy.
Right. That's it. Okay, side trail. Ding, 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 ding. The train is off the tracks. That is something interesting about the movie. We don't need him explained. We just understand Hedley is motivated by money. He wants to run the people out. He knows the land's going to be valuable. The train's going there. If he can get everybody out of there before the train gets there, he can scoop up the land cheap, sell it for a lot of money, make a ton of money. Simple. We don't need a backstory. We don't need midichlorian counts.
I don't think you do. I don't think you need to overcomplicate things, because then the message is often
Isn't that
lost.
what's wrong with some of the movies today? We try to figure out how to explain everything.
She was that way because her third cousin had a grim childhood. You know?
Right.
Who cares?
No, and that's the thing with him. He's just bad. And he is the traditional Western trope of a bad guy. So when you see him on screen, if you have any familiarity with Westerns at all, you know that he's the bad guy.
He's the dark lord of the desert genre.
Right.
That's right.
He's
and you may not like Lyle, and you may not like Taggart.
I love them both, actually.
I know, I do too. They're awesome.
They're lovable idiots.
Yes, they are. But their strings are being pulled by Hedley. And so you really have the guy at the kind of the top of the pyramid scheme who you really despise. So,
and if we were to, let's say, go back and tell a prequel story, maybe Hedley is still bad, but maybe not quite as bad. We get the fact that the more they've been able to get away with stuff, the more evil they become. We don't need to know why they headed down that path. They just are.
Right.
Hedley, the hurting years.
Yeah, we go back.
The story of his misunderstood childhood.
He was. Yeah, we could tell a whole. Could you imagine telling a prequel story of Hedley Lamarr today? What Hollywood would do?
I mean, how did he end up in the desert in the first place? That town?
He's a politician. He
Searching
probably
for
saw
money.
land out there.
He took the train.
Well,
through the quicksand.
The story of the West is the story of land.
It's the story of land and land barons. I mean, hey, let's talk about that. You've got a background from England. I mean, the English know all about what it is to have, being the baron of your land and the lord of your land, and you move up. The more land you have, the more power you have.
Well, of course, I was one.
Well, what happened? Boy,
I told you I got thrown out. You
fell an awful long way to land over here.
Exile. Still hurting.
I mean, that's always been land has always been sort of tied with power.
The landed gentry, absolutely. Yeah, and often you would, if you go back far enough, Wars of the Roses sort of period, you would be given land that had nothing to do with you or where you were from. You would be like Lord Suffolk, and you would own land in Wales, which back then was kind of crap because there was just sheep. But
has it changed?
Well, it's more sheep.
Just more.
But I'm actually part Welsh, so I can say that. But no, you would absolutely, you'd have a title like Lord North or the Duke of Norfolk, but that wouldn't mean that you lived in Norfolk or you had land in Norfolk. Right. You'd probably have land in Southampton or somewhere else, and you'd probably live in, I don't know, London.
But that was not only power, but also prestige.
It was power and prestige.
If you did something to the next higher, whatever tier, lord or king,
exactly.
And they said, if you do this for me, I'll make you the Lord of Westeros. You know,
exactly.
I mean,
and there was a hierarchy among lords, if you like.
It's a Game of Thrones reference. I know there is no Westeros in England. I know. I'm just for our listeners who got lost for a second.
I found it once. It's a little village outside Midsummer Murders. Midsummer Norton. That's another one.
Midsummer Murders.
No, that's
I think
a
we've
series.
got the name
I
of our
just
next
segued
podcast.
into a series. Oh, you ought to see that. You ought to see that. That's good. That's
It's like
good.
a twist on Shakespeare. We'll just call it, instead of Midsummer Night's Dream, it's Midsummer Night's Murders.
Which is a lot more entertaining.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, in this same sense, you know, just like land, the Old West was no different. It was just a little bit more modern, but the West was all about, and you look at a lot of the stories that we know, started with either crooked sheriff or a crooked businessman, people who decided we want to get the individual rancher's land. We can partner up with 2 or 3 people, create our own conglomerate, and just take over. And how many Westerns is that like the theme?
It's
all of them.
It's
All of
because
them.
it's people, and it follows the same thing. I mean, you go with Robin Hood stories, like the Kevin Costner Robin Hood film comes to mind with its wonderful cheesiness, and you think of the same. It's basically the same thing. That the bad guy, brilliantly played by
Alan Rickman.
I was going to say Rick Wakeman. Where did that come from? Alan Wakeman.
Alan what?
Rick Wakeman.
I was going to say Rick Wakeman. I knew that.
And he hasn't had anything to do.
I don't think Yes or Prog Rock actually had anything to do, apart from that mullet that Alan Rickman, I'm sorry, yes, brilliantly played the sheriff. My point being, if there was a point at all, is that you've got another classic sort of stereotyped villain portrayed beautifully, like our friend Hedley Lamarr.
Right. Yeah. Sheriff of Nottingham. Do we need to know why he's the way he is? He knows the king's away and he can do whatever he wants.
Exactly. And you just have a forest instead of a desert. You know, or it doesn't really matter because it's all about people. And switching off on another tangent, if you take a horror movie like The Thing, that's about people, but it's about people in Antarctica attacked by some.
But it's also about the unknown, like who's really.
It's the fear of
how do we ever really know who's bad underneath if you hide it?
Yeah.
So,
but it's about us, and the whole thing about Blazing Saddles, it's a humorous barb at humanity, if you like.
Yeah,
it's taking the piss out of us by us. I mean, it's brilliantly done. In
the end, it's like you said, Walt, at the very beginning, it's going to force us to look in the mirror. We're just going to look through the funhouse mirror first.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a funhouse mirror, but we still aren't looking at ourselves.
Yeah.
I think, too, if we had Hedley's backstory, I don't think it would be as funny anymore. Because, you know, we would have some kind of sympathy for him.
Yeah, you would lose the edge. I mean, he works so well because he is what he is, and you don't. That's what you need to know about him.
That's right.
He's defined. He's a clearly defined character.
And it's just like we said with Taggart and Lyle, that the reason they say the words that they say that we hate and respond to so much is because we're setting them up as the bad guy.
Yeah,
we don't want them to be sympathetic characters.
Absolutely.
So
they've got. I mean, it would be disastrous if they were. I think. I mean,
you need a guy who, if they got run over by the train, you would be happy about that.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
You don't want the whole sympathetic nonsense. Just let the bad guy be the bad guy.
But isn't it amazing? Even though he did that, I think how he wrote the writers and then the direction and the editing and how it all came together. I know I've said this before. They're still just likable enough that we're okay laughing at them. Yeah. We don't so despise them that we want to shut the movie off. Yeah. And to walk that fine line of giving us the evil character and then the henchmen who do the bad things, and we want to see them lose, we can still laugh at how goofball they are.
Yeah, exactly. And that comes over so well. I mean, the goofball element is they're basically sending themselves up with their own stupidity. I mean, a classic line, he says, you know, what is it? I'm so smart and those guys are so dumb. Although that was about the village people. Well, not the village people, but the village folk. Because YMCA, I don't think comes in this.
It's fun to stay at the...
Now, a visit from the village people would have been very interesting.
Actually, that would have been an interesting scene towards the end of the movie, wouldn't it? When they go in, instead of the black and white, you know, whatever the Predator sort of spin, instead of that, you could have the village people.
They would have been doing their thing.
Because, I mean, they
Mel Brooks could have played the Indian.
They shot a movie.
I mean...
with Bruce Jenner.
Wait, we're moving along. Move along.
Fascinating.
I asked you if you had seen Holy Grail because I ran into somebody who thought, well, Mel Brooks stole the ending from Holy Grail,
and it's
where
actually
Holy
the other
Grail
way
actually
around,
ends in the modern time.
Yeah.
I said, no, actually, Mel Brooks did it a year before. This came out in 74. Holy Grail came out in 75. But I also think Mel Brooks did it better. We don't just end in modern time. We still got the sheriff and the Waco Kid sitting outside the theater.
Yeah.
And I kind of love how this works. They go back in to see how the rest of the movie's going to turn out.
I agree.
Well, what do you want to do now?
Come on, let's check out the end of the flick.
Yeah. Gee, I sure hope there's a happy ending. I love a happy ending.
And as they walk in to go sit down in the theater that we've already seen a couple of times, they kick back, they've got popcorn, and I love it. We transition immediately back into 1874 downtown Rock Ridge. It's beautiful.
It is.
The only thing
I wish Monty Python had figured out how to do something like this with Holy Grail, because that's my one weakness with Holy Grail. Just like, I get you just want it to end, but it just ends.
I think it had a few holes in it, Holy Grail, compared to some of their other things. But I have to say that Holy Grail was before Blazing Saddles, because Blazing Saddles was a Western and Holy Grail was set in the days of King John. And,
you're right.
So Knights in Armor were
so these two different documentaries that we're talking about, Holy Grail and Blazing Saddles.
Exactly. And it's all true. I mean, it's all fact, as we know. It all happened.
So because it was set in like the, what is it, the 1080 or whatever, when was King Arthur's time?
King Arthur's time was
like 13 something?
500. No,
earlier than that, like 850. Something like that,
500. No, 500.
500. So that makes it an older movie. Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, well, of course it does.
Like History of the World.
There's somewhere in there.
History of the World spans. I mean, it took forever to shoot that thing.
Yeah, it did. I mean, they didn't have horses back then. They
all
only
of
had
human
coconut.
history.
So it's got to be older, isn't it? But no, I get your point. I think, yes.
But I love the transition back to where we return back into the movie, and everything that's all been topsy-turvy, the whole spilling out in all these movie sets, the duel, we had to have the duel, right? We talked about that earlier this week.
Absolutely.
Well, you've got to have the two main characters have the duel. We go back, and we've got to have the denouement. We've got to have the ending, right? And what Western wouldn't end with, riding off on a horse?
It's the defined ending. I mean, that's the only ending you can have in a Western. One guy rides off, the other guy snuffs it. But I mean, they all get in this. The brilliant thing about this, they all get in a Cadillac. And I kind of like that. That's
now, don't jump ahead. We still got a couple of minutes.
Sorry, well, I'm just
Well, and what I really like about the scene is they could have screwed this up. Because what they could have done is they could have put this on the streets of L.A. and had all the townspeople sitting there. I'm really glad they did it the way they did and went back to Rock Ridge.
Yeah, because imagine how bad the traffic would be.
It's terrible.
That would be awful.
Terrible. I mean, you would have all of downtown LA shut down.
Turned up in a totally different movie as well. I mean, it
terrible.
would be a mess.
It would have been a disaster.
Yeah, it would.
I'm just going to try to get back here to the movie.
I think you got the two wrong people in the room to be able to.
We often talk about when they've deviated from the script. We already mentioned an ad-lib line, but this is nearly perfect. When Howard Johnson says,
"Sheriff, you can't go now. We need you."
And then Bart responds, and it's perfect. He delivers it. I mean, this is verbatim from the script.
The work here is done. I'm needed elsewhere now. I'm needed wherever outlaws rule the West, wherever innocent women and children are afraid to walk the streets, wherever a man cannot live in simple dignity, and wherever a people cry out for justice.
It's a great closing speech.
I was wondering if that was taken out of another Western, if they just did it verbatim.
I mean, it probably was.
It sounds like it, but I couldn't find one that it came from.
I don't think so. I think it's that same thing we talked about with Young Frankenstein when he said, when man first climbed forth from the slime. Yeah. I was like, that's got to be from either the original book or an ancient version of something. It wasn't. Gene Wilder wrote it.
Yeah.
In this case, this is Mel Brooks and company writing these lines and Bart delivering them. And that's where his stage acting comes in. It's really well delivered. Which,
beautifully done.
When you have a perfectly delivered line, you got to turn it on its head.
Yes, you do.
And I love the entire town calls him on it, and they yell, "Oh shit!" Now, did you notice? For some reason, the governor is actually in this scene.
I noticed that. I wonder if Mel.
Yeah, how did he end up in there? Because he,
Well, in the TV version, he comes to town.
Before the sacking of Rockridge.
Yeah, so he's actually
Because I don't know how he got
there.
there, because the train wasn't working. So
No, the train wasn't working. He comes on a stagecoach with a press tour.
Oh, okay.
Now, they cut it out of the theatrical version, but then they put it back in the TV release.
That was nice of him.
It was very nice. Because I like it.
Yeah, I was happy to see him then.
When we discussed,
I was glad he had his trousers on.
See, I know you didn't hear these minutes yet because they haven't come out, but they will be coming out by the time these come out. So it's that weird time paradox of the way a podcast works. But we discussed that it was probably taken out when they realized there was no graceful way for him to get out as the main bad guys come riding into town and begins the riot.
Right.
So they just chose to get rid of that whole subplot. But in the TV version, they returned it with him riding into town, the governor, to do a press tour of how cool it is to have had this sheriff in this western town and how, look at me, I put him here. You know, he was going to take all the credit. Typical politician, right?
Absolutely.
And he jumps out and has his picture taken with a cutout of a person. And
I love the GOV across his back.
Yeah, Gov.
I mean, you can't beat it.
Everybody's got to know who he is.
Everyone knows him. Yeah, especially him.
When he's given that speech, we get a shot, a couple of inserts. We get one where we see Reverend Johnson, the useless Van Johnson, Harriet Johnson, and Gabby Johnson on one side. Then we get a close-up of Lily von Stupp along with the Governor Lepetamain. And I can't tell. It doesn't look like his eyes are crossed, maybe. It's always so hard to tell with him.
Yeah, he looks more serious than I think we have ever seen him.
What's with this move? Well, you're a hat person. If they're wearing a hat, they're going to like pull it up and then put it down. And if they're not, if they're having it over their hearts, they can do this thing where they put the hat up in the air and then put it on their heads. Like, what is that all about?
I've never really figured that one out.
I'm just going to have to do this.
Oh, no, you got to be doing it in front of the mic.
And down.
Yeah. You're like, why raise the hat and then put it on? Or if you're wearing it, lift it and then put it on. It's just, it's a weird choreographed thing.
You
run for it.
You salute. I mean, you can kind of do the, hey, thanks to the crowd for cheering my home run or whatever. But
no, I think it's a sort of,
or is it
kind of a salute to him?
Kind of a salute.
Yeah.
Or is it a West thing that he's amplifying that to not get hat head, you got to kind of put the hat straight down on your head so you don't have like a messed up hair when you take it off later?
I don't think it works.
I think it depends on the hat.
It could very well.
If you can grab the hat with two fingers literally above your crown and pull in a vertical line, I think it might work. But if it's it's a floppy hat or something, and you can't sort of grab it, it might not be. I think you have to practice it.
We're also in the same town square when Bart first arrived, but not quite the same pomp and circumstance. But there is that little box, but they've got a different sign in front, and I can't quite make out what the sign's supposed to say. Is it goodbye? I think
it says Gobbler's Knob.
No, it does not say Gobbler's Knob. I think
good body.
You got Mongo's head in the way, and you've got a couple of the townsfolk.
And he's got, what is it? I was fascinated by what he's got. Is that a Welsh leek or what is that? A giant cabbage?
I don't know what he's holding. We're going to talk about that next minute because he's holding some shrubbery.
I thought maybe
he was out trimming the verge.
Desert plant.
Right?
He could be trimming the verge. He could be trimming the verge.
As you are often wont to say, not me, but you.
Well, it has to be done. It has to be done. Verge trimming. It's important.
I like a good trimmed bush.
It's too much information. The way trimming is important. Not a lot of people know that. You're only meant to blow the bit.
I do think this sign is supposed to say goodbye, but it looks like where they had the welcome
like
sheriff
was
a professionally made sign because they've obviously gone through their fair of sheriffs. They had to kind of whip together a goodbye one because they've never had one
painted by children.
It's bugger off spelt backwards.
Bugger off. Well, this is where the minute is actually going to end right here, just as they're all putting their hats back on their heads, and we're getting this sort of a medium long shot showing all the crowd gathered with Sheriff Bart on his horse. I love the fact that he's back in his traveling duds, what we first saw him when he was traveling across the desert to a live Count Basie
orchestra.
Orchestra.
It's a good look.
He's got the hat, he's got the tin star. I mean, he's got his silver handled or his silver guns. I mean, it's great.
He looks like he belongs there.
He does. I mean, he does. He's made a lot of people happy.
Yeah.
Well, okay, before we tease what's coming up on Monday, and we sort of kind of, in general, how cool is it that we've got Higgins starting off with this conversation? You can't go. What a change of heart in this town.
Yeah. I mean, he came across as a smarmy little git to begin with, but actually he's quite a nice chap.
Isn't it great?
And he's got a good heart.
And then nobody the last thing they wanted was this black sheriff. They were ready to kill him in roughly the same setting. where they had the podium set up, they had the flag set up, everybody was to greet him.
Because it was so against protocol, and it was so against what they were, where their empathies lie, what they believed they should think. But when they actually look beyond the obvious and realize this guy's great,
right,
and then they think he's fantastic, so they get over the prejudice.
They not only learned how stupid their prejudice was, but now they don't want him to leave.
Exactly.
And are all the main characters from the town hall meetings and everything up on the podium? I think they are.
I think they're all there.
I see Samuel Johnson in the long shot, and we've got Olson Johnson, and then we've got...
And Howard.
Yeah, Howard was already was there. Yeah, so we've got them all. We've got the same select members that we saw in the church when they first had when they first read the letter to the governor that Harriet herself has composed.
I really would have liked to have Olson Johnson give one more blow it out your ass Howard.
He couldn't because this is like a sincere moment. The BS line, they're just calling him out like, you just want to go, but we'll get into that tomorrow because there's still a little bit more dialogue left in this scene.
Yes.
Walt, I'll go to you first to give our guest a chance to prepare any leftover notes. But do you have any notes for this minute number 90 that we didn't hit?
No, I just think it's a pretty powerful minute. We do have the final death of Hedley, and that's sad. But it really is a spectacular genius that they end this the way they do.
Jim. Can we call you Jim?
Some people call him.
Some people call Jim.
Do you have any other notes that we didn't get to in this minute?
Well, I think I would have liked when Hedley fell. I would have liked a little bit of dramatic music then.
It was quiet.
It was a bit quiet. I mean, he had to say what he had to say, but I think there could have been a little bit of.
They could have had like the harmonica music, something like that playing,
something like
very
that.
Western.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe a bunch of people in the background going, yeah. But no, I thought a little. It would have added a little bit ambiance and mood to that moment. Aside that, I think it was beautifully done. I would like to see what that actually says. I do think it's bugger off backwards.
I think I'm going with goodbye.
Goodbye. Farewell.
Auf Wiedersehen. Good night.
Yes.
Let's see. I want to make sure I don't jump ahead for what's coming up tomorrow. Yep, we'll get to some line changes and still some additional script changes, but that's going to be not tomorrow, Monday. We get to enjoy the weekend. We get to enjoy Slim Pickens' birthday and Mel Brooks' birthday. Everybody send him an email or something on Facebook or Twitter. My last note is a reminder of how beautiful the transition back into 1874. Yet we're reminded the last time we saw Bart and the Waco Kid, they went into the theater, much like probably the 1974 audience was sitting in that same kind of theater setting, watching now this same ending. So once again, reinforcing what I've said before, the whole reason we spill into the modern times is a reminder this message is still applicable today. So if you're sitting in the theater watching the movie, this movie is also about you.
Yes.
And I love it.
The movie is about you, isn't it? I mean, the movie is, it's not about you, but I mean, the movie is about you.
It is about Alan specific.
It's an Alan specific movie. Yes.
Yeah, much like Burton, I didn't get the right contract signed and I haven't gotten paid. So, damn. Yeah. But no, it's about us and about how we should always be learning this lesson of stop judging people by anything other than by their character and who they are.
Exactly.
Let them reveal who they are. Don't judge them.
The Water Babies? The Water Babies? Are you familiar with that? That was kind of weird, creepy book, but it had all these very creepy. It was Victorian, Kingsley Amis or something. No, that's wrong. Charles. Anyway, but they had these two scary women paintings, and one was "Do as you would be done by," and the other one was "Done by as you did." And the "Do as you would be done by" was kind of nice and kind and gooey, and the "Done by as you did" sort of had black teeth and long fingernails, and she was evil. I don't know what I thought of that, but that's exactly
sort of
the
a
message
spin on the golden rule.
I guess.
I think she was my sixth grade.
Do unto others.
Yeah, I think we all
do
had
unto you.
Exactly. And I had all these babies floating around in the water, but I never really got that side of it. But there you go. That made me think of that.
Wow.
The sort of
I guess that's why Hedley ended the way he did.
Yeah, done by as he did.
Done by as he did.
Buggered as he did, and whatever. Yeah.
I mean, he was getting ready to shoot Barton, but he got shot instead.
He got shot instead because he did have a little.
Sorry, I did have a weapon. All right, so coming back on Monday, we're going to have J.W. Webb. I will get him a chance to.
Will you let me back in?
I will let you back in.
Well, we were going to try to throw you out, but that's just too much work.
We do want you back. Yes, we're not going to let you out now that we've pulled you off the street.
I hope you got pizza and beer.
You are actually a published fantasy author, so let's give you a second to plug how people can not only find you and your book, but maybe engage with you on social media.
Well, you can engage with me I have a Facebook page, which is James Webb 61. My website is jwwebauthor.com, jwwebauthor.com. And I'm on Twitter. I don't do a lot on that, but it's you can reach me mainly on Facebook and have a natter. I also do a weekly newsletter where I talk about not only the fantasy genre, Game of Thrones, or other things, but I delve into Celtic and Norse myths and legends and subjects that I think are relevant to it. So you can join that for free, and you get a free book on entry, and it'll be great to have you on board.
And do you have has your fantasy series got a name, or like how do people find it besides just your author name? Like, is it called like the Celtic Cycle, or what do you call it?
It's called the Legends of Ansu, which is ANSU spelt, and I'm currently writing book number 9. There's one book I wrote which was a ghost story, which is completely separate, but apart from that, they're all epic fantasy stories. I sort of pitch it halfway between Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, which is a big gap, admittedly. But I have earthy, realistic, three-dimensional, very badly behaved characters. But I also like to have a bit of the myth and magic vibe that goes a bit deeper that you'll find in Lord of the Rings.
Excellent.
Yeah. So
good stuff.
It's deep and meaningful.
Good stuff. That's why we brought you on. We wanted the deep and meaningful, and I didn't get any of it this episode, so go back and work on it for Monday. So,
as long as you brought beer.
Come on, Jim, get your shit together.
Okay, I'll try. Be very deep and meaningful.
Walt, it's Friday. People are, we had our Patreon open like we do every Friday to thank all of our subscribers. But if somebody does want to add to, being a Patreon, we're coming to the end of our season, which means we're starting to look for other films to do for our patrons.
That's right.
Patrons only.
That's right. So what you probably want to do is go to patreon.com/thewilderride. And I guess the deal we've made is that if we have 25 patrons...
Well, rather than say the number, the first goal.
Once the first goal is met, then those patrons will get to choose the next movie that we break down, trash, whatever it is that we do around here, and in one of our Patreon-only sessions. And I'm looking forward to that. Some people have already kind of said some of the movies they want to do, and those are all good with me because I'm fans of every one of them.
Could be interesting.
And of course, I also like really bad movies, so we're gonna have fun whatever it is we do.
We're gonna have fun no matter what.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So and that's patreon.com/thewilderride. And then also I would encourage you to, if you haven't already, join our listeners group at facebook.com/thewilderride. Follow us there, and then hit the button and join our listeners group.
And come on back Monday. Only a handful of episodes left to the movie. We'll start off with J.W. Webb returning on Monday with minute number 91, and we will have Bart saying, "All right, you caught me." And we're going to end with, "Come on," as Jim gets up, putting his popcorn down, getting on his horse, and the music swelling. So sounds like we've got just a few more minutes left of the movie, Walt, and sayonara.
It's crazy.
Got to come back Monday for this, The Wilder Ride.
Well, I guess now that they've vanquished the bad guys, there's no more of that
vanquished
boy shit, redneck.
Aw. Watch that boy redneck. Did those words work for you in England? Like, did you know what that, like redneck and...
Yeah. I think not until about the 1980s, but then you got a gist of it. Movies like Southern Comfort come to mind. There was a lot of redneck referrals in that. So, yeah. You
just kind of figured it out.
Yeah.
Because you don't have that phrase, I don't think.
We don't have the phrase, but we do have the type.
He sits in the corner at the bar and cries.
Yeah, we had that guy.
God, Jesus, I can't believe we got to do that again. We got to do that all over again, Walt.
Well,
that's never happened.
That's the first technical problem we've ever had. So
never had any technical problems.
Where did that come from?
I don't know. It's
crappy. Couldn't hear it.
Crappy. You didn't hear it. I heard it.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to have to deal with it for the first 3.5 minutes of explaining why it was in there. So We're starting all over again. And 3, 2, 1. Why did it go out of my head again?
You said Monty Python's
Tombstone, Life of Brian.
No, the other one.
Holy Grail.